Who's ready for a buck wild crazy idea again? Because those are all I really have. So let's jump in and talk about delusions. Or rather, let's jump in and present the background information that is relevant to a conclusion I want to come to, which does not start with delusions, but actually a rundown of visions. Basically, a vision is a sort of mini gnosis. When a person uses their vision, they are able to pull the power of Celestia to manipulate the elemental energy that can be found around Tibet. So, for example, you're running around with your electrovision and, oh no, there's a thunderstorm! Every time lightning strikes, your vision pulls the lightning's energy towards it and stores it inside. Then, when you want to do something that requires electro, the vision reacts and does what you want based on the energy. It seemingly doesn't actually go through Celestia. Think of it like plumbing. The plumbers don't come into your house every time you want to wash the dishes, but they do set up the pipes that let you get the water to your house and out whatever faucet you're using. And then, as we know, a gnosis is a little closer to Celestia than a vision. They directly resonate with Celestia, and their users are able to use their elemental powers, even without having their gnosis in their possession. Despite not having her gnosis for years, Ai is more than capable of using her electro attacks. I don't want to say that a gnosis is essentially one of those kitty walkie-talkies, considering how much damage that the Tsaritsa is willing to overlook in other nations to get her hands on all of them. But that is the vibe I'm getting from. Unlike with visions, I believe that those with a gnosis may absorb the elemental energy into themselves and store more energy than a vision could. And now, on to delusions. What makes up a delusion, and how does it work? Well, thanks to everything that happened in Inazuma, we know that delusions are made out of the remains of dead gods or other powerful beings. This allows the user to manipulate energy and do what they wish. And now that we have all those facts laid out, we can get to the actual theory of the video. Seemingly, there are two types of delusions. The ones that the Harbingers have, which allows them to focus on one element / have a little transformation sequence, and the ones that are neutral. Both of these versions would have the same base, since without Celestial's magical power of conversion, the delusions are going to have to rely on the remains of the old gods to form the different energies into what the user wishes. See, well, visions react to and start the transformation process when there is elemental energy. Delusions seem to use a person's emotions. For example, in the Delusion Factory, it is only once the traveler's anger towards Scaramouche starts to get stronger that they're affected by the mist filling the place. And that makes sense if you think about it, because if delusions are being made out of what was once a living creature, that living creature would have had to do something to cause the reactions and emotions or something that they can rely on. It also explains why it would take a toll on the user in a way that visions don't. Instead of using the energy of the world around them, delusions are using the energy of the people wielding them. Hence Tartaglia's exhaustion and Tebe's death. Now, the difference between the two types of delusions seems to come from the Tsaritsa's influence. Unfortunately, what she does differently is unclear. I don't think the Harbingers even know the full details, for a reason I'll get into later. However, this difference can be visually seen by the mark of the Fatui being inlaid on them in place of an element, and the fact that they can use some elemental powers. This means that, so far, we've really only seen two of these types of delusions, Tartaglia's Electro one and Signora's prior one. These delusions are special as they allow the user to take on a new quote-unquote form and seemingly connect to the original vision that the user had. See, when we fight Tartaglia and he goes into his second form, it's possible to see his delusion, which is sitting in the exact same place that his Hydrovision had, even in the same container. Then, when Tartaglia enters his third and final form, both the delusion and his vision are present on him. That's a different weird, complicated thing, because you see, that is also when we finally see him actually being exhausted from using his delusion. As if, now that they are separate, his delusion has to rely on his power and his energy. And this idea of delusions taking the energy being accumulated by the vision is also really the only explanation of how Signora never curled in on herself and withered away. In almost every instant in which we've seen her, Signora was running around in her second form, having let the grief and hate alter her perception of the world and leading to the crimson witch's flames in the first place. So what are these forms representative of? Well, with Delusions pulling on the Vision, which are connected to Celestia, it seems as if the point of the Saritsa's Delusions are to be able to make mini-gods by pulling on two divine sources to create one form. Is that what the Saritsa is going for? Maybe. She does want to fight Celestia, though it's unclear if that is her ultimate goal or just a coincidence that she accidentally produced mini-gods. However, it does seem as if they may be the aim of someone in the Fatui. Dotaro, one of the Harbingers, and we pause for a second. Editing terminal here. Hi. I had his name written down wrong. It's not Dotaro, it's Dotori, so I'm gonna probably the entire time refer to him as Dotaro, but just know it's Dotori, not back to the script and stuff now. Sorry about that. Was known for inhumane experiments prior to joining the group, and with the backing of the Fatui, these experiments continued and started to involve more people. One of these experiments was centered around Chloe, one of the main manga-specific characters. Who did the experiments on her is unclear, but someone decided to embed Chloe with Archon residue. What is Archon residue? Well, it's a term made from a mistranslation, with the residue actually being from dead gods that were running around before the Seven. So basically, Archon residue was what they used to make delusions. With the Archon residue inside of her, Chloe is able to use the same powers that are seen in the second type of delusion, the non-elemental delusions. This second type of delusion does not feature the mark of the Fatui and creates the black flames. These flames can take on whatever form the user wants and is capable of devouring life, even seeming to have a great hunger for anything living, at least when Kali used her python it did. We don't know a lot about these experiments, but we can assume that it all started with the mist grass being used to help the Chichen mages summon their little elemental creature Chichens, as the smell of the grass is present when a delusion is used. During these experiments with the grass, they seemingly found something that allowed them to move on to the Archon residue and the creation of the first delusions, which they started to test, seemingly on the people of Mondstadt. See, it's pretty safe to say that Diluc's father, Serpus, was not a member of the Fatui. However, the man somehow managed to come into possession of a delusion. From the design which we see in the webtoon, we know it's not one of the ones made by the Saritsa, but one of the experiments. This leaves us with two possibilities. 3 years before the game began, either Cerberus found one on a dead experiment, or he was given one, and that fight that he had to do on the road back to the Dawn Winery with Deluc was actually an experiment. And I'm gonna lean towards the latter, based on the fact that Cerberus had been interested in becoming a Knight of Favonius. He wanted strength, but was never able to make his dream come true, meaning Cerberus and Tepi's stories parallel each other. But either way, given Kali's young appearance and the fact that we know that secondary delusions, and therefore the Archon residue, can rapidly age people when used, I think we can assume that the human infusion experiments were conducted after. Plus, we can also assume that it would be the logical progression. Only a madman would go right to human experiments. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe they did do human experiments first. Well, whichever order these experiments were done in, we are left with the question, if they were trying to make a god, why were they so okay with Kali disappearing? After all, by injecting the Archon residue into her, she is pretty much the epitome of turning a human into a god. But Dutro is so casual about the missing experiment, handing off the job to Barnabas and heading off. Well, the answer is twofold. It seems like Kali isn't the only person to have Archon residue infused into them. Barnabas himself is shown to be able to transform into a magical horn lion serpent thing with what looks to be the black flame as his mane. This means that not only did their experiment succeed, but that Dotary probably left Barnabas to deal with Kali, as he felt that Barnabas would be able to handle her, as he was a success, human god, and she was an attempt that had rejected the Archon residue. It's not clear whether or not the Saritsa or the other Harbingers know about these experiments, but I would lean towards at least some of the Harbingers not knowing. After all, with the events of Leeway, we know that they are not exactly speaking with each other about all their plans, and with the events of Inazuma, it's clear that they all have their own goals. Plus, let's be real, if Child knew he could get godlike powers, I feel like he'd be climbing over everyone in line to be a part of the experiment. I'd also lean towards the Tsaritsa not having a clear idea about it either. She's obviously disconnected from the 11, and as noted before, they don't seem to know how her versions of the delusions are created. I mean, if they had to find out how to make their own forms of delusions, it's possible that they aren't talking to the Tsaritsa about their plans at all. So, to summarize. Delusions mimic visions and gnosis by using emotions to channel a person's life force and create the user's will. The delusions made by the Tsaritsa have the marking of the Fatui and seem to work in some way with the vision that the user has, but both may be used at once to gain a godlike state. Another form of delusion has been created by the Fatui with the aim of creating a human god, which the Tsaritsa most likely doesn't know about. And that's the end of this crazy theory. See you next time when I talk about whatever else pops into my head in the middle of the night. So yeah, bye, thank you for watching.